Morning YouTube. Couple of nice collector garage items there, but this is a discussion about the 997 and why you might consider buying a 997 at the moment. Something that I'd like to encourage you to do. I think when we think about the 997s, you've got to consider them in context, I guess, of the other 911s that you can choose from. I think the earlier cars, things like the 80s CS and the had a beautiful I think it was 86 or 87 maybe Carrera Cabrio, but they're really heavy cars, heavy to drive, heavy steering here, heavy brakes, heavy clutch, and yeah, they're just old. They don't have, things don't work. They don't have air conditioning that works. And so they're a very different proposition. They were followed, of course, by the 964. I think the 964, the stat is something like 80 or 88% of the car was different, but of course it still looked the same. And they're just fantastic, but particularly expensive here in Australia at the moment, and probably everywhere else. I don't know if it's the Singer effect or what it is, but I'm a modern driving experience with the old shape. Wonderful thing if you can get your hands on one, but in Australia now, I suppose they're 150,000 for a 964, a manual. Then the 993s, again, fantastic car if you can buy one, but prices as well, very, very high at the moment. And the problem with the 993 in particular is it seems that the engine seals go and they start leaking oil, and that's about a $20,000 fix, so it's not cheap. And so while I like them a lot, and I had a beautiful red coupe, red manual coupe, and
Okay, just a little one. These little Fiesta
and a Cabrio in Australia. Both cars, beautiful little cars, but particularly in the coupe version, very expensive now. And then we get into the air-cooled cars, the 996, the fried egg design. A lot of people didn't like them. I think it was because they looked like Boxsters. And while there's nothing wrong with a Boxster, they were a cheaper car. And so I think that look sort of held the 996 back. And I just think the 996 are outstanding value at the moment. You can still get a manual for maybe $50,000 or $60,000 in Australia, which seems to make no sense at all, because, as I say, the 993s that preceded it, I suppose they're the last of the air-cooled, so they're always going to be a premium, but 150 grand or whatever. And then 997s that came after it are also getting basketball, or starting to sort of move up and through $100,000. So the earlier car is much more expensive. The later cars is much more expensive. And so the 996, particularly if you can find a manual, I actually think a really good thing at the moment. And the look of them, the smaller feel, and the smaller car itself, I think is really appealing. So I'm a bit of a fan of the 996 at the moment. I think they're special. So the 997, I think, is that sweet spot, and that's what everyone's talking about at the moment, between the more contemporary cars, the 991s, which, let's face it, they've taken all of the reasons you wanted to buy a 911 and almost engineered them out. So it's easy to drive, it's compliant, and I'm sure at sort of 9/10 there, the car starts talking to you. But the reality is, with the 991s that started around 11 or 12 or something like that, that you might as well be driving a Golf, because for most of the time you're going to be driving so far within its capabilities that it actually just becomes a bit boring and loved. So the 997 is right in that sweet spot, because it's still a car that is engaging, it still talks to you, it's responsive, it's noisy, it's a great shape and a great look back to the round headlights, so it doesn't have the drawbacks of the 996, but it doesn't have all the rough edges rounded off with the 991, so it falls in between. And that's why 997 values that were probably sub-100 for a good part of the last 5 years are now sort of heading up through $100,000. Aesthetic point of view, once you've seen the 997 4S, you're probably not going to buy an S, because it's those crazy rear guards that you just can't get enough of. And once you've seen one, you're just not going to buy a normal car. So the 4S I think is very, very special because of the way it looks. But the other thing about the 4S, that's super cool, is that they were more or less the same spec as the Turbo in terms of, you know, every bit of fruit that Porsche offered, they stuck into the turbos, of course, and the 4S benefited from that. So all of the, I don't know, xenon lights and God knows what else, you know, proper sized wheels, and you know, it's not a BMW where it seems that even seats are options. So, you know, Porsche reasonably specify out their cars, but this one in particular is highly specified. You know, with that Alcantara roof lining, looks great. It's got a Bose stereo. It even has back there a couple of, if you can see, oh, right, there it is, Bose. I don't know what they do. I presume it's some sort of a subwoofer type thing, but I believe they also introduce a little induction noise through those. I'm not sure if that's synthesized or real, but it's got that, and of course it has all these, you know, modern contemporary type of things like the sounds, like the telephone and the map. It's quite funny, the map itself doesn't work much these days because, you know, the roads have changed a lot since 2006 or 7, and so half the time if you're on a highway it thinks you're in the middle of a paddock, but apart from that it actually does have a map. God knows who would use it these days when you've got a phone. The other thing that's quite funny is that the phone, it's still got this concept of, you know, dialing it here, and actually the way it worked is in there you used to put a SIM card and so it had its own, you know, phone system. So I don't know how that works because you'd have to have a different SIM card with a different number. So if you want to, it's all right if you want to call somebody, if someone wants to call you, how are they going to know your number and when you're in the car to actually find you? So I don't think anyone uses that anymore. This car, of course, as most would have today, has been updated with the Bluetooth system. It's got, you know, air conditioning that actually works. So again, you know, different from earlier cars, and it's got these, in this specification, these sport modules, which presumably make it faster if you want to go faster, and you can switch off here the electronic stability. I'm not sure again why you'd want to do that. You end up in a wall and I suppose you switch it off, but otherwise, but you know, the point is it's all very modern, very contemporary, everything works, and so you know, memory seats and God knows what else, and so the 997, you know, benefits because it's essentially a modern car. And it's got this thing, God knows what it does. Presumably, I think it's part of the sports pack, and it looks very nice. But I can't imagine anyone seriously using it with the. So we'll take it for a drive, and because really at the end of the day, I guess that's what matters, isn't it? So we'll take it for a bit of a drive. 3.8 engine. In the 4S, so it didn't have any of the IMS bearing issues. Nice things like red brake calipers and all that sort of stuff. So let's take it for a drive and see how it goes. The real reason to own a 911 though, particularly in this 4S, is just the way it looks. Those rear guards are just fantastic, and you don't get that obviously with the So what would we say about the 4S? I think the obvious thing is that, like all these normally large engine, normally aspirated 997s, you know, incredibly communicative in the steering, lively, very different to the 991 in terms of, you know, how this car is communicating back to you the whole time. With the 991, you feel like you've really got to be wringing its neck to be getting it to even close to you know, its capabilities and where it starts to really get lively. Whereas this one's, you know, lively all the whole time. But the difference with the 4S is that it's really planted. I mean, like, it really feels stable at all speeds. So while it's still lively and talking to you, it's a very, very stable experience. And you know, if you had to get somewhere real quick, there would be few cars, I would imagine, who would cover the ground quite like a C4S 911, and certainly few that would cover it in as entertaining a fashion. Anyway, YouTube, thanks for watching. As always, this 997 is available online at the Collector Garage, www.thecollectorgarage.com, and more cars, more experiences, more fun to come. Thank you.